Continue with the end of last video, we talked about upcasting. So we can casting object if they are allowed to convert by each other. But one thing is, if you have your superclass object reference to refer to the subclass object, this one actually we call is upcasting. But upcasting actually, even you allow to write the casting symbol like earlier I showed you at the end from the previous video. But one thing is you don't have to, because upcasting already allowed from the polymorphism. So that's why we call that implicit casting. So since upcasting is implicit casting, how about the converts from the other way about the downcasting? So here we will continue to talk about downcasting. Right, so downcasting when will be happen? So still at the same thing. We just say, for example, we do have object O variable. This one is a reference. We fill our student object. So because upcasting, we can allow to using the superclass type to refer to the subclass object. So then through the O, we can invoke toString method, because toString method defined in the object O. And also we will do a dynamic binding, right? If student object override this toString method, we will invoke through the student object. That's okay. But one thing is, how about even we know we're using the O to refer to the student object, but we want to invoke O.getGrade. So this getGrade actually is a method defined in the student object. We define the getGrade in the student class. So from here, I can refer O through using the O to refer to the student object, but cannot using the O to invoke the method only in the student object. Actually, the answer is no. When you do the O.getGrade, will causing compiling error. Why? The reason is, remember, when we see those statements, when you want to do the O.getGrade, compiler only have the knowledge when they review each statement. So now when compiler see O try to invoke getGrade, so O actually is what? Is object reference. So compiler only have the knowledge this one is all object reference. So when they try to using the O to invoke getGrade, compiler will try to find is, do I have getGrade in the object class? So the answer is what? No. In object class, we don't have getGrade. Even you say, why? See here, O refer to the student object. But one thing is, remember, when we're using the O to refer to the student object, that's by the wrong time. We don't have the object created until we run the program. So compiler doesn't have enough information. Compiler can do is what? I know you think computer is smart, but it's not as smart. Programmer write the compiler. So compiler, what they do is, compiler only read line by line. So they only check one statement. Is it valid? Right, is that valid? You pass compiling. But here, if you're using the O to invoke the getGrade, sorry, is compiling error, because getGrade is not defined in the object O. So now, for example, if I have a B is the student reference, I'm using this B to refer to the student object. Now, can I using the B.getGrade? Yes, you can. Because why? Because when compiler see, oh, B is student object, so then the getGrade is defined in the student class. So then it's fine. So that's why here now, what we need to do is, after we have these two lines, I declare object O equal to the new student. So now what we should do is, we need to using the student B to refer to this object. So how should we do? Right, so now let me write in the red color. So what we will add more. So this one is, we need to assign B also equal to this object, right? But after we create the object, we're only using O to refer to that. So that's why if B want to refer to this object, I need to equal to O. Because I need to assign the location to the B. But unfortunately, this one is, again, compiling error. Why? Because B is a O or not. You see, student B is student data type, but O is what? O is object, right? So parent class object is not always a children object. So that's why we say this one is what? You want to have a higher level data type convert to a lowercase data type to be referenced. So this one we call downcasting. So the downcasting actually is not really legal because superclass is not one kind of subclass. But we know they really link to the student object. So that's why you need to explicitly do the downcasting. So that's why we do here is you need to do the casting. So if you try to using the O to cast, then refill by the B, then here you will be fine. So then you don't have compiling error. This one you just do the downcasting. So that's the downcasting. So the downcasting actually we have to explicitly to do that. Then here, because they only happen in the runtime, so that's why when you have your upper class reference, you want to assign to the lowercase, not lowercase, subclass reference, we need to do the downcasting explicitly. So here again, that is reviewed, we do the downcasting. So first thing, right, we're using the O to refer to the new object. So later on, if we want to assign this object to B, we cannot do automatically. So that's why we cross out. That's the compiling error. So you need to do the downcasting explicitly. Okay. Or if you don't want to do the, so then after you do the downcasting, okay, so then you use the B2 using the get grade. Or the other way, we can just temporarily do the casting. Also, that means here is when we have the O, we do the casting first. Then make them cast to the student object, then we get grades. So sometimes be careful when you do the casting, right? And then you want to invoke the method. You need to using the parentheses to cast this object. But afterward, you need to put the parentheses again. So this is important for the parentheses, the outer parentheses. Because one thing is when you're using the dot, they will right away associate with the O. So that's why here is wrong because they're using the get grades right away associate with O. Then they do the casting. So the order is wrong. So if you want to do the casting and invoke the get grade at the same time, you need to have your casting the object happen first. So after you're done, don't forget you need to have the outer parentheses. So then you get the grades. So either way, you can invoke the get grade method only in the student object. So that's the downcasting. So the downcasting, why we need to do the explicitly cast? That's because they are not always true. Because the upper class type, not always the reference can refer to the subclass type. So that's why we need to do the explicitly casting. But upcasting is always true because your subclass type is always the superclass type. So not only your downcasting, you need to explicitly to make the note. And also the best way is, sometimes if you do the downcasting, it's better we need to check if that's valid. Because sometimes, like we say, when you do the casting, right? When you cast an instance of superclass to a variable of its subclass, explicitly casting must be used to confirm your intention. So to the compiler with the class casting notation. Because sometimes if you try to do the downcasting at the runtime, but the runtime actually is not, the type not match when you do the downcasting. So then you will have an exception happen. So we will talk about exception after the midterm exam. But just let you know, if you try to do the downcasting, but during the runtime they are not really correct. For example, here actually is not a student object. This one actually is a circle object. Then even you say you try to do the casting, but this one is already wrong. It's not a student object. It's not a student object. So that's why downcasting, sometimes you will have the runtime error. That's the exception will happen. So that's why here we want to show you an operator we call instance of. Because sometimes your superclass object is not always the instance of the subclass. So in order to prevent the class casting exception happen, then before we do that, we need to do the instance of. For example, you see here, I refer O to a rectangle. So then I try to using this O to call get radius. So that's why you see, just for example, I don't have this if statement. I only have this line. You see object O is rectangle, but I right away try to cast this O to circle, then I invoke the get radius. So then if you run on your program, they will have exception happen. So then here, in order to prevent this exception happen, so then usually before we do the downcasting, we will check. We make sure the runtime, if O is instance of the circle, then we do the casting. Otherwise, we don't do the downcasting. So the instance of example that see this example, we modify from our earlier our display object. So you see your display object information. So maybe I want to, I know if this one is the circle, I want to get diameter. You see, get diameter is only in the circle class, right? So then for the rectangle, we call the get parameter. Okay, so this one actually is in the rectangle. So that's why here, when we try to do that, you see, each one, even you pass in the geometric object, but I want to, according to they are circle, rectangle, or other type, I want to invoke specific methods through that object. So in order to make that happen, we just need to add the instance of. So you see, object instance of circle. If that circle, I invoke get diameter. Else if it's rectangle, so I will invoke the get parameter. So make sure you will run this program in the Eclipse. The example, your casting demo. You see we have the circle and the rectangle object create. So then we update our display object. So then if you run this program, so then you will see they display correctly because you know the circle, if that's the circle object, I will call the get diameter. So then if that rectangle, I call the parameter method. So this one is because we can make sure they using the instance of to check. But now I want you to comment it out. Because remember earlier we told you, if you don't do the instance of to check, then you just try to do the casting right away. So then you see circle, fine, I can call get diameter. But how about if rectangle? Okay, so that's why here we didn't check. So that's why any object passing, I all call those four methods. So if you run, then you will find out, right, so you see here is your arrow. Okay, so your arrow, they will show, you see in line, so every time if you have arrow, you see here, that's the exception happen. That's what we talk about in the lecture. So you see that's in line 20. Okay, so that's why in line 20, you see they will fail here first.